will be set out in the usual way.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Simon Fell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister and Mr Hobbs, for joining us. If I can just go back to the Chair's first suite of questions. Looking at the Australian model, Mr Hobbs, you mentioned the suite of tools that they use there, one of which is pushback, which we are now not using. I'm interested to know whether you think, as we're not engaging that policy, but just relocating individuals, do you think this is going to be as effective as the Australian model in preventing these criminal gangs from moving people across to the UK?
Is that directed to me or Mr Hobbs?
Whoever would like to take it.
So what I would say on that is that we believe that what is significant about this partnership is that individuals who are relocated to Rwanda will have their asylum claims, if they wish to enter the asylum system there, heard within the Rwandan system. And of course, if they are granted asylum, they will then remain in the Rwanda. That is the way that this policy is configured. As I said earlier, George Brandis set out, I think, quite a powerful and compelling case during the course of the Nationality and Borders Act evidence sessions about why he believed this would work. But it isn't about one single intervention. This is about the whole system reform that we are introducing, making sure that we process claims more quickly, that we provide certainty either way for people, making sure that we remove people who've got no right to be here without any needless delay, and of course just changing the dynamic overall. We've talked about hotel costs, for example, which are clearly unsustainable and unacceptable. This is whole system change that we're introducing, and I think that the Rwandan policy is an important part of that, but of itself it is not the only solution to this. But I think it will fundamentally shift the dynamic.
So in terms of modelling then for how that dynamic will shift this year, do you have an expectation for numbers you would expect to be moving to Rwanda in 2022?
This is an uncapped scheme, and the Prime Minister has said that we expect thousands of people to be relocated to Rwanda as part of it. It is very difficult to quantify specifically the effect that it will have, because there are so many dynamics that play into this. Of course, the flow of migrants making crossings, for example, is materially relevant to this, and that will, of course, play into the deterrent effect that this has. So what I'm not in a position to do is to comment specifically on numbers that we would expect to be relocated this year. If the policy has the effect that I hope it will have, we will begin to see a real drop-off in terms of the numbers of people making dangerous journeys to the UK in the first place. That of itself will demonstrate the success of the policy. But what I can say for the committee is that we are determined to get on and deliver this. The Prime Minister's been clear about that. The Home Secretary's been clear about that, because we think this is an important intervention that will make a difference.
And obviously when this was trailed in the media, we were shown pictures of the accommodation that some of these individuals may be housed in. There will be limited facilities there on the ground already. So how much capacity is there on the ground at the moment?
So again, I reiterate the point that this is an economic development and migration partnership, and one of the reasons that the partnership is configured in the way it is that we want to provide proper support, working with the Rwandan government to make sure that this is a success. We think it's important that that is done fairly, and that there is proper cost support provided to this. Members will have seen in the media reports some of the accommodation that has been made available in Kigali to support this. Of course, the flow of migrants and the numbers of people being relocated is materially relevant in terms of the infrastructure that's required, but through the contributions that we are making, I would argue that we will be able to support the Rwandan government to put proper provision in place, and that as the numbers evolve, the numbers of people that are being relocated evolve, the infrastructure is able to keep pace with that to make sure that that accommodation is there and that the proper wraparound support is available too.
Just to press you on this, just in terms of initial capacity in Rwanda, where are we sitting at the moment?
So there is, as you've seen, accommodation that has been made available for these purposes, and of course the Rwandan government is keeping under careful review the appropriateness of its stock of accommodation to meet the needs that exist as we process cases. And of course this is a partnership. There is dialogue that takes place nearly every day of the week with the Rwandan government around this, and that dialogue is important because it helps to shape the decisions that are made. I would also just add, for example, that They of course have hotel accommodation available as well that may well be an option in the shorter term, while further more permanent accommodation is brought on stream. But there is that permanent accommodation in the way that you've seen demonstrated in the media reporting on this.
So moving on a bit, the Home Secretary stated that everyone who is going to be considered for relocation will be screened, interviewed, have access to legal advice. What's your estimate for how long that process will take to move an individual from the UK to Rwanda and go through that process?
In terms of that particular process, we are talking weeks. So this is a process that should be concluded very quickly. Of course, with experienced caseworkers taking the lead, making judgments on cases on a case-by-case basis, and I suspect that I'll be making this point about looking at cases individually in several of the responses to the questions that will no doubt be asked. But that is work that will go on. It will be done intensively. This will be properly resourced. There is that experience amongst the case-working team to do this. We, of course, do not want people to have unnecessary and elongated uncertainty around their cases. So we will get on and process those as quickly as possible.
We've taken evidence in this committee before when we've looked at channel crossings around individuals and their habits or what they're told to do by many of the criminal gangs to destroy the documentation they're carrying, to hide any evidence of sometimes which country they come from, often their age. So under those circumstances where individuals are arriving in the UK but they don't have documentation, how's that going to play out through this process?
So obviously we will get to the bottom of those particular issues in individual cases, and it's worth just making the point that the individuals who are making these dangerous and unnecessary journeys will be treated as being inadmissible to our asylum system in the way that we've set out previously. But again, what will happen is we will take, on a case-by-case basis, appropriate decisions. People will have the opportunity to make representations in their own way, and of course recognising the particulars of their individual circumstances, and the ultimate judgment about whether individuals will be transferred to Rwanda is whether it is safe for them to be transferred. But we will work through those issues appropriately, because that is right and proper, and we think that it's crucial that people have opportunity to make representations about their specific cases and lodge any reasons why it would be inappropriate for them.
And I suppose I'm challenged by the point that if we don't have individuals' date of birth, their nationality, we don't have any documentation for them, how that process will run in a matter of weeks.
Perhaps Mr Hobbs could add more to that.
Thank you. So just to come in, obviously third country removals is not something that is completely new to the Home Office. We've done it under the Dublin system, and it's not uncommon that, as you say, that some migrants do destroy their documentation, or if there is an issue of age dispute. Obviously, any age dispute would need to be fully concluded before someone is served with a notice of intention to transfer to Rwanda. What happens is, which we're starting this week, is serving the notice of intention. Individuals, if they're in detention, they have 7 days to bring any representations, during which time they will have access to legal aid. If they're not in detention, there's a 14-day period where they can work with their advisors and legal representatives to bring anything forward. The only preclusion on nationality or to transfer is if you are Rwandan. So if somebody is Rwandan, then they obviously do not fall within this policy, but any other nationality is. So there are standard procedures for establishing age, as well as we do collect biometric and biographic details on the individuals who present to us. That is standard as part of the immigration system.
Thank you. And my final question, Chair. There is a quid pro quo to this, which is that we've agreed to take some of Rwanda's most vulnerable refugees. What criteria are they going to be selected by, and do you have an idea on numbers for those?
So we will say more about that in due course, as you would expect. But what I can say is that we are talking tens here, and it will be individuals for which they have particularly complex needs that we are perhaps better able to meet in the United Kingdom, where, for example, there are perhaps particularly acute health vulnerabilities, for example.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask, you said that the Rwandans